Imagine stepping into a world where the lines between the spiritual and physical realms are not just blurred, but seamlessly intertwined. A place where history is not just a series of dates and events, but a living, breathing force that connects the past, the present, and even the future. Welcome to Tibet, a land of mountains, monasteries, and a profound mysticism that has shaped the lives of millions for centuries. Here, in the heart of the Himalayas, lies a unique history, one that tells the story of an ancient culture and an enduring spiritual tradition. Tibetan Buddhism is not just a religion, it's a way of life, a guide to understanding the world in ways that few other cultures can offer. From the rise of the great Tibetan kings to the spread of Buddhist teachings, Tibet's history is a tale of resilience, wisdom, and spiritual awakening. What makes Tibetan history so captivating is its depth and complexity. It is a history of inner journeys, where monks seek enlightenment in the silence of the mountains, and lamas carry the torch of ancient wisdom. It's a history shaped by the struggle to preserve traditions in the face of political upheavals, invasions, and challenges. And yet, despite centuries of adversity, Tibetan Buddhism continues to inspire millions around the world today. But what is it about this spiritual journey that continues to captivate us? How has Tibetan Buddhism, with its teachings of compassion, mindfulness, and interconnectedness, influenced not just the people of Tibet, but the entire world? Join us as we delve deeper into the untold stories of Tibetan Buddhism and explore the rich spiritual history that continues to leave an indelible mark on humanity. Tibetan Buddhism is far more than just a path of meditation or teachings of peace. It is the very soul of Tibet, a spiritual tradition that has touched millions of lives across centuries. At its heart lies a profound belief in reincarnation, karma, and the deep interconnection between all beings. This isn't merely philosophy, it's a way of life, woven into every aspect of Tibetan culture. But how did these mystical teachings shape one of the most resilient and unique cultures in the world? To understand Tibetan Buddhism, we must first understand the very essence of Tibet itself. High in the Himalayas, isolated from much of the world, Tibet became a cradle for spiritual seekers who explored the deepest questions of existence. The belief in reincarnation, for example, doesn't just shape their view of life and death, it influences the way they approach every moment in between. Every action, every thought, and every decision is tied to karma, the idea that our past actions ripple through our lives and those of others. From the ancient Bon traditions to the spread of Buddhism from India, Tibet's history is rich with spiritual transformations. The arrival of Indian Buddhist masters and the eventual formation of the Tibetan Buddhist lineage gave birth to a system of practices designed to help individuals achieve enlightenment in a world full of suffering. The resilience of Tibetan Buddhism is not just in its ability to survive centuries of invasions and political strife, but in its ability to adapt, evolve, and remain a guiding light for people around the globe. Despite the challenges, the core teachings, emphasizing compassion, wisdom, and the interdependence of all life, continue to offer solace and insight to millions. So, let's take a closer look at the spiritual backbone of Tibet, uncovering how these ancient beliefs not only shape the culture, but continue to inspire and influence the world today. Long before Buddhism became the spiritual cornerstone of Tibetan society, it made its way from India, traveling across the vast Himalayas to find a new home in Tibet. This journey was not just one of geography, but of deep transformation. As Buddhism encountered the Tibetan landscape, both physically and spiritually, its teachings began to merge with the existing indigenous Bon practices, creating a unique blend of traditions that would shape the culture for centuries to come. But what truly happened during this historic transition? How did these teachings evolve from foreign ideas into the very fabric of Tibetan life? To understand this, we must first look at the Tibetan people, who had long lived in isolation high in the Himalayas. Their belief system, rooted in Bon, centered around nature, spirit worship, and rituals designed to harmonize with the world around them. When Buddhism arrived, it brought a fresh perspective, a profound understanding of suffering, impermanence, and the path to enlightenment. Rather than replacing Bon, Tibetan Buddhism began to weave itself into the tapestry of indigenous beliefs. The two traditions didn't clash, they merged, creating a unique spiritual system that honored both the teachings of the Buddha and the natural world revered by the Tibetans. Buddhist monks and lamas adapted the core principles of Buddhism, compassion, wisdom, and mindfulness, to the Tibetan worldview, offering tools to navigate life's challenges, while also honoring the ancient traditions that had shaped their lives for millennia. Over time, Tibetan Buddhism became more than just a religion. It became a culture, a way of thinking, and a way of being. The monasteries became centers of learning, the rituals of daily life infused with spiritual meaning, and the teachings of the Buddha transformed into a profound way to understand the universe and one's place within it. This blending of ancient Tibetan beliefs with Buddhist teachings created a system that was not only deeply spiritual, but also practical. It was a system that could endure the harsh realities of life in the high mountains, yet still offer hope, guidance, and a path to inner peace. So, how did these teachings evolve over time to become so deeply embedded in Tibetan culture? Let's journey back in time to uncover the fascinating story of how Buddhism became the heart of Tibet, shaping its people and their way of life for generations. In the 7th century, Tibet was transformed under the visionary leadership of King Songtsen Gampo. This was a time of profound change, when Tibet emerged as a unified kingdom, marking the beginning of a new era of power and cultural fusion. But what made this period truly extraordinary wasn't just the expansion of territory, it was the way Tibet began to weave Buddhism into the very fabric of its identity. Imagine a kingdom where the forces of military conquests and strategic marriages didn't just serve political interests, but also carried the seeds of spiritual transformation. King Songtsen Gampo, aware of the influence of Buddhism, sought to integrate it into his kingdom, not just as a religion, but as a powerful tool for unity and governance. He married 2 Buddhist princesses, one from Nepal and one from China, bringing Buddhist teachings to the heart of Tibet. These marriages were not just diplomatic moves, they were symbolic gestures that connected Tibet to the broader world of Buddhism, ensuring its influence on the Tibetan court. But how did Buddhism, a spiritual practice born in India, become a cornerstone in the consolidation of power? The answer lies in its capacity to offer more than just moral guidance. It provided a framework for political legitimacy. Buddhism brought with it the ideas of compassion, non-violence, and the interconnectedness of all beings. For a ruler like Songtsen Gampo, these teachings offered a way to govern with wisdom and justice, a means of creating stability in a realm often marked by conflict. As Buddhism grew in influence, it began to shape the culture and society of Tibet. Monasteries were built, serving as centers of learning, spirituality, and political influence. The king's adoption of Buddhism was not just personal, it became an emblem of his kingdom's strength and vision for the future. The merging of Buddhist teachings with the political and military strategies of the time created a powerful new dynamic, where spiritual and temporal powers were intertwined. Through Songtsen Gampo's efforts, Buddhism laid the foundation for a lasting cultural legacy in Tibet. It became the spiritual backbone of the kingdom, shaping its laws, guiding its rulers, and influencing every aspect of daily life. This fusion of faith and power didn't just define Tibet in the 7th century, it set the trajectory for the entire region, ensuring that Tibetan Buddhism would continue to resonate for centuries to come. By the 9th century, Tibet had entered what could be called its golden age. The kingdom was at the height of its cultural and spiritual flourishing, and this was a time when Buddhism, deeply embraced by the royal court, began to shape not only the religious landscape, but also the very heart of Tibetan society. Monasteries flourished across the region, becoming centers of learning, art, and political influence. But this was more than just a religious transformation. It was a full-blown cultural and intellectual revolution. Tibetan Buddhism, under royal patronage, became a powerful force that transcended temples and prayer halls. It began to touch every corner of Tibetan life, transforming everything from art to politics and even social structures. Monks, scholars, and artists were inspired by Buddhist principles, producing masterpieces that combined spiritual devotion with intricate craftsmanship. The intricate mandalas, stunning thankas, painted scrolls, and the development of Tibetan Buddhist iconography were born during this time. These works not only served as spiritual tools, but also represented the Tibetan worldview, one where the sacred and the everyday were inseparable. But the impact of Tibetan Buddhism didn't stop at art. It had a profound influence on politics as well. Buddhist teachings provided a framework for governance that emphasized compassion, wisdom, and ethical conduct. Rulers were expected to act as protectors of the Dharma, ensuring that their subjects could live in harmony with the teachings of the Buddha. This spiritual approach to leadership helped stabilize the kingdom and unite the Tibetan people under a common spiritual and moral code. Socially, Buddhism also created a shift in the way people interacted with each other. The concept of karma, which emphasizes personal responsibility and the interconnectedness of all beings, influenced how Tibetans viewed their relationships with others. Compassion became the cornerstone of social interactions, shaping not only how individuals treated each other, but also how they viewed their place in the world. The rise of monastic communities and the importance of lay followers also blurred the lines between the clergy and the common people, creating a sense of unity across different levels of society. What can we learn from this golden period? Tibetan Buddhism's integration into all aspects of life shows how a spiritual tradition can deeply influence culture, governance, and social structure. It reminds us of the power of a shared belief system to transform not just the hearts of individuals, but entire societies. Tibet's golden age was not just about prosperity. It was about the flourishing of a culture that balanced spiritual wisdom with worldly realities, creating a legacy that continues to inspire the world today. As with many great civilizations throughout history, there came a time when the Tibetan Empire began to crumble. For centuries, the kingdom had been held together by the strength of its monarchy, with the royal family playing a pivotal role in uniting the diverse regions and people under one banner. But as the 9th century progressed, the very thing that had once been the glue holding Tibet together, the monarchy, began to fracture, leading to the eventual destabilization of the empire. What caused this collapse? Was it the internal strife and power struggles that tore apart the royal family? Or was it the external invasions, such as the devastating attacks from the expanding forces of the Uyghurs? Perhaps there were deeper forces at play, like political disillusionment or the weakening of central authority. It's hard to pinpoint a single cause, but the result was clear. The once mighty Tibetan Empire began to disintegrate, and with it, the stability that had allowed Tibetan culture and Buddhism to flourish. But even as the empire fell apart, there was one force that remained resilient: Tibetan Buddhism. Unlike the political structures that crumbled under pressure, Buddhism held strong, remaining a cornerstone of Tibetan identity. The monasteries, though sometimes threatened, were able to maintain their spiritual and cultural importance, continuing to serve as centers of learning, refuge, and stability. Despite the political chaos, Tibetan Buddhism evolved and adapted. Even during times of invasion and internal conflict, the teachings of the Buddha continued to guide the people of Tibet. The focus on compassion, wisdom, and mindfulness offered a refuge from the turmoil, providing a spiritual anchor in times of uncertainty. Monastic communities, though often caught in the crossfire of political struggles, remained dedicated to preserving Buddhist teachings, ensuring that the flame of Tibetan Buddhism would not be extinguished. In the face of adversity, Tibetan Buddhism stood resilient. While the empire may have fallen, the core of Tibetan culture, the spiritual wisdom that had been passed down for generations, endured. It's a testament to the strength and adaptability of a tradition that has survived centuries of upheaval and continues to inspire and guide millions around the world today. The Dalai Lama, the spiritual and temporal leader of Tibet, is one of the most powerful and enduring symbols of Tibetan Buddhism. For centuries, this figure has represented not only the heart of Tibetan spirituality, but also the political unity of the Tibetan people. But what does it truly mean to be the Dalai Lama? How did this institution come to hold such profound influence over both the spiritual and political realms of Tibet? The story of the Dalai Lama begins long before the title itself was even coined. It's rooted in the deep intertwining of Buddhism and Tibetan culture. The title Dalai Lama literally means ocean of wisdom, and it was first bestowed upon the third Dalai Lama in the 16th century, though the institution of the Dalai Lama had existed in a nascent form for centuries. But the Dalai Lama is more than just a title. It represents a living embodiment of spiritual authority, and more importantly, the reincarnation of Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of compassion. To be chosen as the Dalai Lama is not only a recognition of spiritual greatness, but also a belief in the cycle of reincarnation, where each Dalai Lama is considered to be a continuation of the same enlightened soul. But how did this unique figure come to hold such powerful sway over Tibet's political landscape? The rise of the Dalai Lama as both spiritual leader and political figure was a gradual process. Over time, the role of the Dalai Lama merged with the governance of Tibet, particularly after the fifth Dalai Lama in the 17th century. Under his leadership, the Dalai Lama became the head of state and the spiritual leader, consolidating both power and influence. This unique dual role was vital in maintaining stability and unity in Tibet, particularly during times of internal strife or external threat. The Dalai Lama's influence wasn't just about politics. It was also about embodying the core principles of Tibetan Buddhism: compassion, wisdom, and the pursuit of enlightenment. The Dalai Lama became a symbol of the Tibetan people's struggle to preserve their culture and spiritual traditions, especially in times of hardship or foreign oppression. From the monarchy to the modern world, the Dalai Lama's role has been pivotal in shaping not just Tibetan history, but the global understanding of Tibetan Buddhism. In this video, we'll explore the untold story behind the Dalai Lama, uncovering the spiritual and political forces that shaped this iconic figure. We'll look at how the Dalai Lama became a living symbol of Tibetan resilience, the soul of Tibetan Buddhism, and a figure whose influence continues to resonate around the world today. By the 20th century, Tibet faced one of its greatest challenges in its long history. The Chinese occupation, beginning in 1950, led to widespread destruction of Tibetan culture, the dismantling of monasteries, and the loss of countless lives. The very fabric of Tibetan society, its beliefs, practices, and way of life, was being systematically targeted. Yet, even amidst the devastation, Tibetan Buddhism did not fade away. The question is, how did the Tibetan people manage to preserve their culture in the face of such overwhelming forces? The answers lie in the unbreakable faith of the Tibetan people and their incredible resilience. Tibet's spiritual and cultural identity has always been anchored in Buddhism, and even when their monasteries were destroyed, their sacred texts burned, and their leaders exiled, the essence of Tibetan Buddhism survived. The strength of Tibetan Buddhism is not just in its teachings, but in the people who live them. In the face of unimaginable hardship, Tibetan monks and lay people alike continue to practice their faith in secret, passing down teachings in hidden caves, remote villages, and even across the borders into India and Nepal. The Tibetan diaspora became a vital lifeline for the survival of their culture. Exiled monks and scholars, having fled the oppression, became custodians of Tibet's spiritual treasures. They established schools, monasteries, and cultural centers in exile, ensuring that Tibetan Buddhism would continue to thrive, even if it was no longer practiced on Tibetan soil. Their perseverance, despite the constant threat of persecution, stands as a testament to the unwavering belief that their spiritual heritage was worth preserving, no matter the cost. Through it all, the Tibetan people held on to the core values of compassion, wisdom, and non-violence. These teachings, deeply ingrained in their way of life, became a source of strength during times of unimaginable suffering. Despite the challenges, Tibetan Buddhism did not just survive, it adapted, found new expressions, and found its place in the world beyond the Himalayas. The story of Tibet's resilience in the face of occupation is not just one of survival, but of triumph. Tibetan Buddhism, though silenced in Tibet, continues to inspire millions around the world. It's a living reminder that faith, when deeply rooted in the hearts of a people, can withstand even the harshest of storms. As Chinese authorities tightened their control over Tibet, thousands of Tibetans were forced to flee their homeland, seeking refuge in India, Nepal, and other parts of the world. This mass exodus, driven by political and cultural persecution, marked the beginning of a new chapter in Tibetan history. Among the exiles, the Dalai Lama emerged not only as the spiritual leader of the Tibetan people, but as a global symbol of peace and compassion. As Tibetans dispersed across the globe, Tibetan Buddhism found new homes in countries far beyond the Himalayas, and it began to take on a new global significance. But how has this diaspora helped Tibetan Buddhism evolve and adapt to the modern world? The answer lies in the way Tibetan Buddhism has been reinterpreted and embraced by a diverse, international audience. No longer confined to the remote mountains of Tibet, Tibetan Buddhism spread to the West, where it has influenced countless individuals and communities, introducing a whole new dimension to the spiritual landscape. Monasteries were rebuilt, Buddhist teachings were translated, and Tibetan Buddhist masters traveled abroad, teaching and spreading the Dharma to people from all walks of life. This global expansion has not only helped preserve Tibetan Buddhism, but has also given it a new vitality. In places like the United States, Europe, and Australia, Tibetan Buddhism has found enthusiastic followers, many of whom are drawn to its unique blend of deep spiritual practice and profound philosophical teachings. The Dalai Lama, as an ambassador for Tibetan Buddhism, has inspired millions, promoting messages of compassion, interfaith dialogue, and environmental awareness. Through his leadership, the teachings of Tibetan Buddhism have gained recognition in academic, spiritual, and even political circles. Yet, despite these successes, the Tibetan Buddhist diaspora faces its own set of challenges. The preservation of Tibetan culture and language outside of Tibet remains a critical issue, as younger generations born abroad may struggle to connect with the traditions of their ancestors. Additionally, Tibetan Buddhism must adapt to the realities of the modern world, where materialism, technological advancement, and cultural change present both opportunities and obstacles. How can a centuries-old tradition remain relevant and accessible to a fast-changing, often secular world? The diaspora's efforts to address these challenges are ongoing. Tibetan Buddhism must continue to find ways to bridge the gap between ancient wisdom and modern life, ensuring its relevance for future generations. The global spread of Tibetan Buddhism has not only helped it survive, but has allowed it to flourish in ways that were once unimaginable. Yet, its survival and growth in the modern world will depend on its ability to remain true to its core principles while adapting to the needs of a changing global landscape. Today, Tibetan Buddhism is more relevant than ever before. With a growing global following, its teachings extend far beyond the traditional realms of spiritual practice, influencing everything from art and psychology to politics and global ethics. But what makes Tibetan Buddhism so adaptable to the modern world? How does this ancient tradition, born in the mountains of Tibet, address contemporary issues like mental health, stress, and personal development? And, perhaps most importantly, what can we, as individuals navigating the complexities of modern life, learn from this profound wisdom? Tibetan Buddhism offers deep insights into the challenges we face in today's fast-paced world. One of the central teachings of Tibetan Buddhism is the importance of mindfulness, the ability to be fully present in each moment without attachment or judgment. This practice of mindfulness can be a powerful antidote to the stress and anxiety many of us feel in our everyday lives. By learning to let go of negative thought patterns and focusing on the present moment, we can reduce the mental clutter that often overwhelms us. Tibetan Buddhist meditation techniques, such as loving kindness, metta, and tonglen, giving and taking, also provide tools for developing compassion toward ourselves and others, which can be a healing force in addressing emotional suffering. In addition to offering practical methods for mental well-being, Tibetan Buddhism provides a framework for personal growth and self-development. The teachings emphasize the importance of cultivating virtues like patience, humility, and generosity, qualities that contribute to emotional resilience and personal fulfillment. Through the practice of meditation and self-reflection, Tibetan Buddhists learn to transform their inner world, ultimately leading to greater peace, joy, and wisdom. But Tibetan Buddhism's influence doesn't stop at the individual level. The Dalai Lama and other Tibetan Buddhist leaders have been vocal advocates for social change, promoting global peace, compassion, and environmental responsibility. Their teachings resonate in areas like politics, where the principles of non-violence and compassion offer a refreshing perspective on conflict resolution and governance. So, what can we learn from Tibetan Buddhism as modern individuals? First, we can learn the art of slowing down in a world that often demands speed. We can learn to embrace the idea that happiness and peace come from within, not from external success or possessions. And most importantly, we can learn the power of compassion, not just for others, but for ourselves. In a world filled with distractions and divisions, Tibetan Buddhism offers a path to inner peace and wisdom that can guide us toward a more mindful, balanced, and meaningful life. In the end, the ancient wisdom of Tibetan Buddhism is not just for Tibetans or Buddhists, it's for all of us. Its teachings offer a timeless roadmap for navigating the modern world, helping us find peace and purpose even in the most turbulent of times. The future of Tibetan Buddhism remains uncertain, yet it holds a remarkable promise. As the younger generation steps forward to carry the torch of preserving and evolving these ancient teachings, the question arises: how will Tibetan Buddhism continue to thrive in an increasingly fast-paced and interconnected world? Will it hold firmly to the core principles that have sustained it for centuries, or will it adapt to meet the challenges and needs of modern society? One thing is certain: the journey of Tibetan Buddhism is far from over. Tibetan Buddhism has already proven its resilience throughout history, surviving invasions, political upheavals, and cultural erasure. Now, it faces the task of staying relevant in a globalized world, where technology, materialism, and social changes are constantly reshaping the landscape. For many young Tibetans, the teachings of their ancestors are not just something to preserve, they are something to carry into the future, to blend with the challenges of their time and make them accessible to a new generation. In the modern era, Tibetan Buddhism has found new expressions. The principles of mindfulness, compassion, and interconnectedness have drawn people from all walks of life, from busy professionals seeking relief from stress to young activists looking for wisdom to address the world's most pressing issues. Tibetan Buddhism's focus on inner peace, mental well-being, and ethical living resonates deeply in today's world. The teachings are no longer confined to monasteries or remote Tibetan villages, but are embraced worldwide, forming communities in places as diverse as the United States, Europe, and beyond. The question remains: how will Tibetan Buddhism continue to evolve? Will it remain rooted in its traditional practices and teachings, or will it adapt to the realities of modern life, perhaps incorporating new tools like technology, social media, and online learning platforms? The younger generation has already begun blending the old with the new, offering online meditation sessions, virtual teachings, and integrating Tibetan Buddhist wisdom into various fields, from psychology to environmentalism. At the same time, maintaining the authenticity and depth of these ancient teachings remains a priority. The essence of Tibetan Buddhism, its focus on wisdom, compassion, and the pursuit of enlightenment, must not be lost in the process of modernization. The challenge will be to honor its rich history while making it meaningful and accessible to a diverse, global audience. Ultimately, Tibetan Buddhism's future will depend on how it navigates the delicate balance between preserving its core values and embracing the evolving needs of the world. The journey ahead is full of potential, and no matter the challenges, Tibetan Buddhism will continue to be a beacon of wisdom, guiding those who seek truth, compassion, and inner peace. Tibetan history isn't just a story of the past, it's a living, breathing legacy that continues to shape and influence our world today. From the snow-covered peaks of the Himalayas to the farthest reaches of the globe, the profound teachings of Tibetan Buddhism resonate with people of all walks of life. These teachings, rooted in wisdom, compassion, and the pursuit of inner peace, have not only survived centuries of turmoil, but have inspired millions to look deeper into their own lives, seeking meaning and purpose in a fast-changing world. But how does this ancient wisdom apply to our lives today? The lessons of Tibetan Buddhism are not just for monks or spiritual seekers in remote monasteries. They are for anyone who is ready to reflect, grow, and transform. In a world filled with distractions, stress, and uncertainty, the teachings of Tibetan Buddhism offer practical tools for navigating life with clarity and compassion. Practices like mindfulness, meditation, and the cultivation of compassion can help us find balance and peace in our everyday lives, no matter what challenges we face. By embracing the deeper wisdom of Tibet, we can learn how to better understand ourselves, our relationships, and our place in the world. Tibetan Buddhism teaches us that true transformation begins within. By examining our thoughts, emotions, and actions, we can unlock the potential for greater happiness, deeper connection, and lasting peace. It's not just about studying ancient texts or adopting rituals. It's about applying the core teachings to our modern lives and allowing them to guide us in our personal journeys. The choice to embrace this wisdom is yours. Are you ready to open your heart and mind to the transformative power of Tibetan Buddhism? Are you ready to take the lessons from the mountains of Tibet and apply them to your own life? The path is there, waiting for you to take the first step. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey through Tibetan history and wisdom. The teachings are timeless, and their relevance is as strong today as it was when they were first shared. Now, the question is, how will you integrate this ancient wisdom into your life? The journey of discovery is just beginning,